Welcome to Sports Music and Other Ish. I'm your co-host Vic.
I'm your co-host Big John, aka the Black Jerry Maguire.
Today we have on Miss Natalia Nata Cornelio. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Natalia is a first-generation Chicana civil rights lawyer and former public defender. She has fought for people facing jail simply for being poor, has represented families separated at the U.S.-Mexico border, and has dedicated her career to improving the justice system. She is proud of her Mexican roots and is an Aztec dancer. She is also running for judicial. She also is a judicial candidate for the 351st District Court in Houston, Texas. How you doing today, Natalia?
I'm good. How are you all?
Pretty good. Pretty
Great.
Good.
We wanted to have you on because with our current climate, and there's a lot about police reform that's going on, and there's a lot of things being thrown out. We have abolishing police departments, we have defunding police departments, and while to me it sounds great, I think a lot of people they're caught up in the moment, but I don't think we understand what that means. Can you kind of explain what defunding a police department means?
Well, we're getting right to it. Yeah, absolutely. No, and just to give a little bit of context so that you all know who you're listening to, besides thank you for that bio. But yeah, I'm a judicial candidate and I care a lot about reform. Where I work now is the civil rights space, and I'm actually building policies in Harris County for Commissioner's Court for Rodney Ellis right now. And so this is my space, criminal justice reform in general, and I think some people say criminal injustice reform or criminal justice transform because what exists is not working. So police defunding, what does that mean? I think it means that our justice system is built on, lies. I think that when we learn about it, if we learn about it in school, we learn that it is a mechanism to kind of have a system that protects us against violence. But if we learn about it in our home, we have different experiences with what that looks like. I think a lot of our experiences is that there's a lot of discrimination and there's dehumanization by this process that doesn't make anybody feel safe and doesn't make anybody feel like things are fair, and the system is built to protect us. And so I think that the police are the ultimate manifestation of that. We have studied our history. We've seen the military and the police come out against our people, and we see these things, and we witness these things. We witnessed a murder on the internet, and we were maybe like, I know I was heartbroken, but I was not surprised. Yeah. And that's deep. Yeah. And so I think that the defund language comes from, this is broken. Why do we have it? But actually, there's been a lot of work in this space. I mean, this is going to sound extreme, but the prison abolitionist movement, right? Like the people react so strongly to that, and they think that it means, burn everything down. But actually, folks that are organizers in that space are trying to reimagine what a world could look like. And what we've recognized, not me, but what folks have recognized is that what exists doesn't work. So we need to build something that does work. And so defunding can mean a lot of things. It can literally mean defunding. But I think people that are working on it and care about the community or care about policies and politics, we're like, okay, what instead? Because an example that I've heard from a mentor of mine is, in the 70s, people realized that mental hospitals were not working. They were abusive. They were producing bad results compared to what was the goal. And so they all got shut down. Mm-hmm. But now we're all the mentally ill people, yeah. Right? We handle them in jail. We didn't provide the community with the support that we needed to be able to take care of people when initially they were being taken out of our hands, and then they were just given back. And we're all like, okay, like we actually didn't learn how to act right now. Yeah. So there's a lot of different models. And I know I've been talking for a long time by now, but it's basically, there's some programs that are a good example of what we would fund instead. If we're trying to treat drug addiction with jail, how about a meaningful long-term drug program? And it's not like a 6-week program. that you can maybe complete and get off of probation if you do. Because addiction, for any of us who have any experience with that, it's a lifeline thing. I mean, any specialist will tell you you have to go to rehab 7 times before you're healed. And that first time that you go, you've usually had a lot of really low moments to finally get to that. My dad is in his 60s and he finally went to rehab, and he's been drinking since he was like 6.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just, it's about what we build in our community, how we make ourselves and our people able to take care of the problems that are currently being handled, you know, in the way that they are by the justice system. And how do we stop having our law enforcement and our government be so mean and incompassionate to our people? Like, it's like a war against us, and that's not okay.
And see, what I felt like was when I heard defunding, one of the things that I worried about was, okay, so if we defund and we pull funds out, which means that's paying for less training that they probably would need, and then you have the issue of being able to pay officers. So if I'm a good officer and my department was defunded, I may just leave and go to another department that has the funding to pay my salary, which then it kind of leaves some of your, I don't want to say, I guess your lower qualified officers or whatever, are your bad officers. You may leave them in that department where they can't move, either for, you know, marks on their record or whatever. And it just feels like if we just defund, we're not fixing the problem. I just, you know, my worry is that, you know, the training is what they need. Like you said, I mean, I don't know if we need to do, I feel like de-escalation training needs to be like mandatory, like more often than probably what it is. But that was my issue with defunding. I wasn't really sure if they were just saying take the money out, but didn't have any other, you know, solutions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that there's really 2 things. And I think that they can happen simultaneously if we really wanted them to, right? One is people do realize, like, we do spend a lot of our money, our tax dollars that go to these systems of justice. At the end of the day, they're not that efficient. Like, I bet you we could reduce some inefficiencies. And so the issue is, how do we move some of that money that's kind of being wasted to build stuff outside of those systems? You know, like, what would it be like to have a mediation or community circle that could intervene before somebody gets arrested? What would it mean for us to be able to take care of ourselves like that on a massive scale? And how do we invest in those infrastructures so we stop relying on our law enforcement less, and then, like, less money is okay? And then there's absolutely, while we still have law enforcement, there has to be ways to check for inefficiencies, and also continue to improve them for better use of our money. So I've actually been studying all week, you know, oversight models. And the kind of one y'all might have heard of is what happens to discipline police administratively. Who decides when they get fired, if they get fired? Who releases the tapes? Do they release the tapes? When do they release the tapes? Is there a fight? And, you know, I think that one of the things I learned this week is that a lot of times we've focused on the discipline part, but if there is not a clear process and establishment of rules that apply to the police, like criminal laws that apply to the people, and a path of what happens if they don't follow those rules, then those disciplinary boards, like, what are they enforcing? Like, they're enforcing really egregious cases, but not able to make any meaningful shifts in the culture. So there are some pretty cool locations out there where there's community citizen boards that make the policies for the police. LA, the city of LA actually does that. And they were able to, you know, use all these recommendations that, like, expert task forces have done about de-escalation, about releasing tapes and evidence relating to an allegation. You know, and the police were very much against it, but sometimes it helps find the truth in a way that brings, you know, them justice too, if they've been, you know, accused of doing something that they didn't do. So it really can, transparency can be a really powerful tool. And there's been a lot of reluctance by our police to be transparent, and a lot of protections against that. So it's important to demand that and to participate in that, so that it's not just internal all the times. Like, I make my own rules.
Yeah.
And I get in trouble from the people that work with me. You know, that's not really fair either.
Yeah. So My question is, do you think that the way that the police are behaving when it comes to people of minority, do you really think it comes down to the training, or it's just that mentality at the end of the day? Because like I was telling Victor, I went through an academy, and everything they talked about was de-escalation. Um, you know, knowing when to tap somebody out, knowing when to, um, tap yourself out, so you won't go overboard. And by any stretch of my imagination, I'm not saying that being a law enforcement is easy, because you have to make some split decisions. But sometimes things like this, like what just happened with Mr. Floyd, it you, that's totally uncalled for, you know. So I just wonder, from where you're sitting at, do you think? Cause I see all these people donating money to more better police training. So is that really going to help them, or is it just a person and their mentality? And do we have to find a way out to try to weed those type of people out during the process of selection of the officers to even participate in those type of academies and stuff like that?
Um, all of the above. And I really like your last idea, which is, think of the recruitment process and taking it a little bit more seriously, because that's really where it starts. I am with you. I mean, is it possible to fix our system? I think all of us, especially lately, it's occurred to us like maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
That's real. I don't know what to tell you. I think we can try, and I do support this idea of also learning better how to handle things ourselves, not like Wild West style, like shooting people.
Right.
Like at the beginning, you guys mentioned that I'm an Aztec dancer, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to share about that. But as I do, talk about justice work to like more and more people in the public, the Aztec dance circle is a circle. And I've learned so much about community and how to act and accountability and discipline and respect from having that community, that village. And so I do think that making sure that we're constantly imagining the alternative is important, because I don't know if the systems that are built on some pretty messed up history are fixable.
Yeah. No, you're right.
When you were talking about the community review boards, is that something that you think we'll be able to see here in Texas, or on a broader sweep across the nation? I know that the Democrats had put forth some legislation, and I wasn't quite sure if that was in there, but I think allowing the community to hold officers accountable, I think, is important, especially when you have people in the community that look like the community.
Yeah.
Because I know on some situations, officers may have violations or, marks on their record. They can leave that department and then go to another department, 2 towns over, and get a job. So do you think that we'll be able to see with this legislation coming up, or have you heard anything about community review boards being put in place?
I can speak best locally just because that's where my head and work is lately. I don't know about Houston. I know that the issue was raised in city council this week, and it got kicked to committee or to a task force.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen there. And so I hope that the city takes seriously their charge of like learning from where the best review boards happen. They're, the LA commission in the city, they have said that since they've built this front end board that sets the rules, officer involved shootings have gone down 50%. I heard that from the commissioner himself, so I don't know if it's true. But that is, a pretty decent source. And I know he writes reports on all of his numbers, and he sent me like a 100-page report to be like, look at what I said. As far as the county, the way that the government is set up, like for the sheriffs and the constables, it's not legally possible. So we would have to change the laws. But I think that on a local level, even there, where the sheriff and the constables have the ultimate say, we can ask for input on that and say like, hey, like we want to see your policies. We want you to have a task force that includes people making recommendations on what all of your rules are. We want experts to talk to those people so that they can be well informed, and we want those people to have staff so that they can actually write the stuff. And then, you know, you should hear input before you pass them, and it should be super transparent. We can do that. Even if it's not a formal legal board, the sheriffs and the constables can sign off on that and say, we want that to be the process before we make the rules.
So it seems like our pressure needs to be more on a local level than it is on a national level.
I have more faith right now on the local level. You know, the DOJ did some really cool stuff during the Obama presidency, and then it got gutted. And like, there's no enforcement of any civil rights or education rights or housing rights. I mean, it just, like, the DOJ has a lot of power. You know, Brown versus Board, it was made law and it wasn't implemented right away because nobody cared. It was just a Supreme Court decision. And so what had to happen was, like, the NAACP sued a bunch of school districts that were not complying with Brown v. Board. And it wasn't until the Civil Rights Act was passed and established the Department of Justice that had a prosecution arm to investigate and establish consent decrees with jurisdictions did the rule get implemented on a widespread basis. And so, you know, if we don't have a strong president that has a strong attorney general, then we won't have really good national results. And so it really is incumbent upon us at a local level to do it. That's why I'm motivated to run locally. There's a lot of really good, smart people that are trying to make changes here at home. And, you know, we can only do the best that we can and vote.
Good deal. So what are some of the things that we should be looking for in police reform? I know, like you said, training, defunding. Is there any other things that we should be looking at as far as what we should expect in the realm of reform? I know kind of one of the things that I truly didn't understand was that whenever there's a case, and so an officer then gets a civil case, the county, I guess the taxpayers pay for it. Is there any reform that you've seen within your county or discussed within your county that they're talking about taking that from a pension fund, making officers be accountable for that? Or is it still the same thing as far as taxpayers being accountable for it?
That's a good question. I know that, you know, we have some good candidates for county attorney. I'm not allowed to endorse anybody as a judicial candidate. But, you know, there's some leadership in that space as far as what kind of representation, what position we take on behalf of officers that are getting sued. But, you know, by the time someone gets sued, it's like really bad. I've done the litigation and I'm like, ooh, this is like, I hope that I can get a little bit farther upstream than this. You know, you mentioned de-escalation. It's like one example of use of force policies. There's lots of recommendations for rules that need to apply to officers on what force to use when it's permissible, how to report it, what the standard and expectation is, prohibited certain types of force, like you can't shoot at a car that's driving away. Stuff like that makes a big difference. No chokeholds. And then reporting, transparency, releasing those tapes, releasing data, having a national database of officer incidents so that one officer that gets fired from one place can't jump to another, you know, without a track record showing what problems have been raised in that area. Those are really important reforms. Any kind of transparency that you can think of, we need it. We don't have it. And on the national level, it would be good to have a database so that when people move, that can be taken care of.
How do you feel about, I know like in Arizona, they're trying to pass a bill to where you can't record officers while they're doing their job. How do you feel about that?
Bad. I mean, it better lose, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's offensive, actually.
Yeah. When I read it, I was like, wow, like you're gonna go so far to try to cover things up that you don't want to be recorded. They're not interfering with your job.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, we haven't talked about the response nationwide to the protests, right? I mean, on one level, like media is like, ooh, 16 days of protest, of nonstop protest, but there's been some messed up responses by officers, and it just shows who has the control. And the effort to stop recording is another example. South Dakota, I just read, is trying to pass a law. The big no pipeline protest happened there, and now they're like, riot supporting is a crime. So to criminalize people's power, which is getting out the way that they have been for days now in huge numbers, that's bad.
Yeah.
And it undermines democracy and accountability and everything good.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as far back as I can remember, this is like the biggest response to officer wrongdoing that I've seen, in a while, and it's everybody. It's not just one type of particular person out there. It's everybody. So I was going to ask you, do you feel like at this point, just with your colleagues and everything, do you feel like that the protests are doing what they are setting out to do? Like they're really, letting it be known or making their presence felt. I'm not talking about the rioting, the looting, and nothing like that. I'm just saying just the protesting in general for the injustice.
I hope so. I know I'm moved by it. And I know that it has caused, the dialogue is different. The leaders are saying different things. It's a big burden to ask people to protest indefinitely until you actually get your act together. Right. But sometimes it feels like our government expects that. And so they want us to work and they want us to hold them accountable, and it's a lot. Yeah. But I'm running and I hear it, I see it, and it grounds me, and I know that there's people that share my experience. So
how important is it when we have cases like this to bring in a special prosecutor?
I think it's important. I mean, even for just the appearance of neutrality, right? Like part of the process is that everybody involved in it, everybody that has a stake in it, is confident that they're getting a fair shot. And I think that for the public to have witnessed this and be confident that they're going to have a fair shot, having an independent person become involved is really important. I mean, independence is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Transparency is everything as well.
And transparency.
Whenever you get on the bench, assuming you win your campaign.
January 1st, 2021.
What are some of the changes you're looking to make? Are there any changes you're looking to make from the bench?
Whew. They're like jumping from policy to this. Yes. I mean, so I was a lawyer in the system. I was a public defender. And so really basic stuff, like show every single person in front of me compassion. I've just been on the other side of that, where we are begging for mercy. And the judge is like, denied. You're like, did you even hear what I said? And this person's life is in your hands and you're not even showing them respect and taking into account their situation. So that's a big commitment of mine. And we do have discrimination, starting with economic discrimination in bail practices, and that's been a commitment of mine since before I decided to run. I was involved in the bail litigation here in Harris County, meaning no one should be in jail because they don't have money, period. Right. And people are presumed innocent, and it's really important to take that presumption seriously. And if it's at all possible, they need to be out while they're preparing for their trial. I think those are the biggest changes. I think that there's some messiness as far as backlog from Harvey and Rona. People aren't getting trials right now, and they are now being allowed to plead guilty if it's warranted. It worries me. I know that there's reasons that we can't have jury trials, but it worries me that somebody would be in jail waiting for their trial, and then their lawyer comes to see them and they're like, hey, you can plead, this is the offer. And they're like, well, what about my trial? And right now the answer is, we're supposed to start doing jury trials like in August, maybe. I honestly don't know if we're going to do it till next year. So you're really going to have some coerced pleas right now, and it's like the process is everything, the integrity of that process. And so anything that I can do to build the integrity of our process during and after and before emergencies. It's a really big commitment of mine. I did represent families separated at the border under Trump's policy, zero tolerance, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
These kids were taken from their parents, no court, no lawyer, no process, it just happened. They didn't know if or when they would see their parents. And so it's just another example of like these processes are everything. We can't just do this to people without folks having faith that they got their day in court.
Let me something about the cases on the border. I had seen a point where kids were having to appear before the judge, and it was just the kids themselves without a representative. Is that true?
I think it's true. I mean, that was that one video that went viral was made to make a point that it was happening. I was never involved in a case where that happened directly, but I do know that that was happening. I mean, I had a case where a kid was deported while the parents were here, but I don't think that they went to a judge. It just was decided because there's certain cases that you can deport people if they already have an order of deportation. There's no process. So the immigration system really needs better process. And immigration status is actually criminalized here. Like you can go to a criminal court and get a conviction and a sentence for being here illegally and returning here illegally. And then after that sentence is over, you go to immigration proceedings and then they detain you until they deport you. And people don't know that, but especially along the southwest border to our Mexican and Central American communities, we do that regularly. And we send people to prison for 5, 6, 7, up to 20 years for being here illegally. Yeah.
That's crazy. So I haven't seen, of course, we haven't seen the as far as the kids being detained on the border lately. It hasn't been in the news. Are we still battling that issue?
Yes. And actually DACA, it might be in the news soon because the Supreme Court is deciding whether Trump could get rid of DACA because he tried to, and then the lower court said, nope, you can't just do that. So that's going to be in the news. That's the deferred action under Obama where folks were allowed to not be placed into proceedings if they came in as kids. So I think we will see immigration in the news, and it'll be interesting to see what the public response is. You know, hopefully folks will organize and, you know, make their voices heard. People are doing their best.
Do you think that's just what it comes down to is for years and years we've been doing things this way and nobody's stepping up saying nothing, and now if people start to say things, we will get some type of change maybe? You think that's what it just boils down to? Everybody's just been like, okay, I'm used to seeing this. This is how it is. This is just how it's always been. Or do you think it's just a matter of just people getting in power, doing what they want to
do? Well, like I believe in the power of time and generations to heal and clear stuff up for what that's worth. You know, I know a lot of people that want to see change experience a lot of fear. And I think that as we breed and we have children and then they have children, each subsequent generation kind of learns from their ancestors and is able to bring to the table more courage on stuff that had to be negotiated differently before. So the more that happens, and then in unity amongst different people, intertribal, the more success I believe that we'll have at changing things.
It's funny you talk about intertribal because I firmly believe like we've become more tribal in America. Mm. You know, either, you know, it went from now you have your liberal or you're, you know, a Republican, and, you know, it just seems like we're more divisive now in public. I mean, I feel like this country's always kind of been divisive, but now it's just starting to hit the mainstream where everybody's seeing it, and it's like it's normal. Like I think we've almost kind of like normalized it. Do you feel, or what's your thoughts on us? Do you think we're reaching a point now where we're turning that corner?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've experienced more Black and Brown unity.
Mhm.
And similarly, like I participate in a lot of Native circles and American Native and Mexican unity. Because the Mexicans were like, we're Native too, and the Natives are, and then people fall in love and people share space, and it makes a really big difference. People have kids, mixed kids, the
Yeah,
best.
that's definitely changing.
Yep, got one on the way.
Really? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Corona baby.
What did you say?
Corona.
Corona baby?
I'm sorry. I'm so rude.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So, you know how, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but when our military troops are deployed somewhere, right? They have all these different rules of engagement.
Yeah.
They got so many rules of engagement that they almost can't defend themselves, even when they know something is about to happen. I was just looking at some of those, and then I watched these movies is based on a true story. I think the one I just watched the other day was the lone survivor or last soldier or something like that. Those guys had a choice to keep those kids to keep those Middle Eastern people detained or tied up, or they could have killed them. Well, the conversation they were having was, well, man, if we kill them, we're gonna go to Leavenworth. Like they knew they automatically, like, because these people don't have no weapons, they don't have anything. But they also knew if we let these people go, they're gonna go tell everybody in that village, and we might not make it out. So they decided to let them go, and then they ended up being up under heavy fire. I think everybody died except for one guy. And me looking at that, I'm like, we got more restrictions on our military that's on foreign soil than we have on our cops, because it seems like our cops just engage no matter what. Um, so I'm wondering if through all this change and reform, will we look at something more as rules of engagement as far as the cops go? And I know they got stuff already in place about how much force you need to use and everything like that. But I'm just kind of wondering. I want to get both of y'all's actually take on that. Just I don't know if you guys knew that, or what do you think about that? Kind of taking some of that military um, restrictions and putting them on our police, because our police are over here like it's the wild wild west, when in reality our military probably should have a little more free reign. If they knew they're gonna be attacked, if they let these people go, then they need to, I'm not saying you have to kill them, but you may just leave them tied to that tree like they were going to do, and just move on. So I don't know if that was a clear question or not, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, so my screen froze for a little bit in the middle of your question, but I think I caught it as far as talking about the rules of engagement for military and whether we should apply it to the police. And I think the philosophy will be different. But yeah, I mean, clear rules that are transparent and that include the input of the people that the police are supposed to serve makes sense. And we need that from our police. It will be better for everybody, including the police, and they know what's expected of them. And then if something's not working out, it could be revisited with the people and they could be changed. But there has to be clarity in that process, and the rules have to be clear.
Yeah.
I was listening to a guy and he was discussing like when they were over, and I believe it was Afghanistan, and they were told that we need to take on a little bit more risk. I mean, we're going to take on a little bit more risk, but what we want to show is that we're here for the people. And so he was just saying how you were saying, John, like they have so many restrictions when it comes to using deadly force. And when they come home, it's not like that with officers. They have a wide range of discretion that they can use, but it's not like that in the military. And I never knew that. And in listening to that, it just makes me realize like we have to do something to where if our military that and they know they're going into these war zones and they know they're going into these situations and they know that they may not make it home, then certainly we can put that those same restrictions here in America on our officers. Now, once again, I know that it's split decision. I know that officers want to come home. I know that it's a dangerous job, and I know that the majority of our officers aren't bad apples. But at the same time, I feel like if we use people that if you live in your community, if you police and live in your community, it's different than if I live outside of that community. Because when I come home or when I police, I may know, to an outside person, Michael may look like a threat. But me living in my community, I know Michael's just a bullshitter. Michael's friendly. He's loved. Everyone loves him. If you just go talk to him, then Michael will stop doing whatever he's doing, where I won't have to intervene and use where it escalates to become a use of force. So I think one of those things is that we got to have our officers live in the community. I know here in Texas, especially in this area, a lot of our officers do live in the community. So it's different from community to community. So when you talk about, communities that are majority black of black people, they may not have that same thing that we may have in this area. So I know it's different. So I don't want people to think we're just putting a broad net over everything. We know it's going to be different in different areas, but I think that where some of these situations are having more community policing. I had a conversation with an officer yesterday, and he was telling me when he was growing up, it was more community policing. Like they were in the community talking to people. And he said he hasn't seen that. He's 3 years from retiring. And he said he doesn't see that anymore, where it's more community policing. He also said he felt like that we've made, during the training of our officers, they made it seem that they need safety so much that it's more of, they're more nervous when they go out because they want to make sure they're being safe so they can make it back home. And that lapse of, judgment, knowing that it's either me or him, may force you to do something that it wasn't necessary. The moment didn't call for that use of force.
Did you first have a sense of like why that change happened or how to change it back?
His thoughts were, he said it comes from the training. He said that our training aspect must have changed at some point. And so now it's more of us being more of a force going out, and they're given so much power that sometimes for some of these officers, it goes to their head and they take this power. And he was telling me that, sometimes, he's not saying that it doesn't happen in some cases. He said, but a lot of the times where we may see something as it being a race issue, it's just more of a power issue. And it may be that person thinking he has that certain amount of power that he, overexert that power onto a person, and it ends up escalating to a bigger situation. But his overall thing was that he feels like the training needs to be changed. Like we need to move back and kind of go back to some of the old ways of training. And I think it kind of changed when we, militarized our police departments. You put them in a situation where they have all this armor and all this gear on, it becomes more of a force than it does a community policing.
Yeah, and going through those type of trainings, man. I mean, I sent you our video. Did I all the stuff that I went through, the defensive tactics, everything, the weapon training and everything. I mean, you feel like you're invincible when you come out of there. But then it goes back to your mindset. Always when working in the probation field, I always hated to work with officers who had a police officer, law enforcement, police mindset, because you can't do probation with a police mindset, and you probably can't be a good cop with a total probation mindset. But one thing I will say is that I talked to a guy that was, I think he was in Michigan. He's an officer in Michigan. He worked there, retired from the Department of Michigan. And he was telling me that, it works both ways with the type of, with your training. Because you have an officer, one day he goes out and he pulls his weapon because he's to protect himself, right? And, nobody dies, nothing happens, situation's handled. He gets back, they review the tape, they review everything, and then they reprimand him because they said he didn't need to pull the drawer's weapon. Then he said, actually, he showed me a video of this same officer in a situation where a guy was totally hostile, and coming at him and pulled a gun on him and shot him and killed him. And basically, he was saying that officer probably was gunshot to pull his gun to protect himself because of the reprimand he had received from the department based on what he did last time. So he was saying, because we talked about this whole area, and I know this Mr. Floyd situation is totally different, but we talked about as far as people drawing their weapons and stuff like that. He was like, man, you know, it's never right to just kill innocent people, he said. But another thing is it goes both ways, because some officers lose their life too because of the simple reason they've been reprimanded for pulling their gun possibly too early. You know what I mean? And then when it's time they really should be pulling it, they're not pulling it and they're getting shot and they're down or getting injured or something like that. And I thought that was very interesting because I never looked at it from that perspective. And like me and you talked, Vic, you went through through some training, field probation training, where you had to go into a house and make decisions as well as I have, and that's hard. I shot a bunch of innocent people when I went up in that house. Like seriously, like the dummies, I shot everybody. You know, hey man, I don't know. So we do want the reform, and we want it done the right way, and try to protect both sides as much as possible. It has to be a balance. It can't be all one side and all the other side. It has to be a balance, and I'm all for that. I just don't know. I don't know how we do that. Honestly, I really don't. From a system that's been the same way for so long, and you got the same types of people at the top of these systems, and then you got the people getting in, trying to use their influence to make change like you're going to do. But then along the way, there may be somebody that tries to shut that completely down because they don't want anything new. They want things to remain the way they always been.
Real.
Yeah.
People do not like change.
Yeah, I don't know why, but people absolutely hate change.
Natalia, I have two questions I want to ask over basic rights. So when someone gets pulled over, do they?
It's like a quiz. Phone ready so I can Google, find another answer.
So someone gets pulled over, do they have to consent to let the officer search their car?
No. And it's tricky. They could be tricky. Like instead of being like, "May I have your consent to search?" They'll be like, "Hey, can I just look around? Just let me look." And so, no, absolutely not. My advice is always ask for a lawyer.
No matter what.
Do I have the right to refuse? Because they have to answer that.
So if an officer shows up at your house and they want to search your house, can they just come in your house and search it?
No, they need a warrant or your permission. And so that's how they get you. They get a lot of free searches because people let them in. And you know, I've been there. We've been in cars before, and we're like, oh, I guess you have to. You know, like it's really hard to say no. Mm-hmm. It's really scary. They're good, but no, you can absolutely demand to see a warrant. You don't even have to open the door. You can ask for them to slip the warrant under the door and say that you don't consent.
If you are detained and they want a statement from you, do you have to give a statement?
No, never. But they don't have to read you your rights all the time unless you're arrested and interrogated. So I've had many clients that you're like, oh, they didn't read my rights. I'm like, oh, they have to like literally have you in a cell and ask you questions specifically about the crime you're being investigated for. But no, you don't. And you can, I think that the safe way to answer is, I want to speak to my lawyer before talking to you. Can you get me a lawyer? No? Then I'm going to have to call my mom and get one. Like, sorry, talk to you later.
One question I wanted to ask too is that I don't know if you ever seen the movie When They See Us, but there is a scene where a juvenile consents to committing a crime that he didn't do.
Hmm.
Anytime that a juvenile is arrested, is he allowed to consent? And what should parents tell their children that may get detained for whatever reason, as far as consenting to a crime?
Get a lawyer. Um, it's out of their league.
Hmm.
You know, I think it's better to have a lawyer. I mean, as a criminal defense lawyer, never say anything. Even innocent things can be used against you, like about where you were. Like, people don't think about that. Like, I was just, at my girlfriend's house. Like, oh, what's the address there? Oh, interesting. Like, right next door to the apartment that we're investigating the burglary for. Right? Like, it just, but it's hard, and I don't think that every police department has clear protocols for how and when to engage the parents. And it's problematic. I do know what movies you're referring to, and it's really messed up. I've had a client falsely confess before, and he was grown, but he had some intellectual disabilities, and it's really bad. It's really messed up. That it's important for people's rights to be taken into account, that they be given their lawyers and their
So with everything that's going on, you're positive, you feel positive about us getting some police reform, some criminal justice reform going on.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I mean, it's going to be studied. It's going to be, even if it's not as instant as it should be, it's going to be studied, and it's going to pave the way for us to have something to look back on that provides some guidance on, like, wait, this isn't working. What do we need to do differently? And we haven't necessarily been making the time and priority of, like, these issues, so the next time they come up, we'll be in a better place than we are this time. But I don't know if I'm confident enough that the reforms will be eviscerating of the problems
I think
either way.
my last question, and that's for those that we've been having here in Texas. I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with it, but our marijuana laws are changing slowly but surely. Um, with the reform, if there is something that comes across as far as our marijuana laws changing, do you think we would go through and push for those that have been prior criminal records for marijuana? Do you think we would get those people, those records expunged? Have you heard anything about that? I know in Houston, y'all have y'all's changed y'all's laws as far as arresting marijuana defenders, correct?
Sort of. Um, and I missed part of your question because my screen froze again. Are you not in Houston? Wait.
I'm in San Marcos. John is in Arizona.
Las Vegas.
Vegas, my bad.
Okay, very good. I understand now. There's a bunch of laws in Texas that were proposed actually by Republicans recently to try to decriminalize or legalize marijuana. And those are two different things, right? One is that you can't get in trouble for it, and the other is that it's actually permissible.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can only get a fine for it or something. And so none of those passed, but it was not sure if they weren't going to pass because a lot of Republicans and conservatives were behind those reforms. And yeah, in Houston, in Harris County, the DA has a diversion program where if you get caught with marijuana, you get a ticket. And then you have to, originally she was still booking people, which is problematic, but you do have to complete a course to be able to not get prosecuted for it. It's like a deferred type of thing. And if you don't complete it, then you have to, then it's not resolved. So that it's definitely not perfect. And it seems like a low hanging fruit to just legalize marijuana already. Right? Why aren't we there yet? I mean, as a judge, I will uphold the laws. I will be sworn to do so, but like, why aren't we there yet? Come on.
All right, so that's the end, guys. Natalia, we appreciate you coming on. We really, really do appreciate that. You want to let all of our Houston viewers know when to vote, and your platform.
Can I ask you a question first?
Yes, ma'am.
What music should I be listening to right now to like relax and feel a little bit less bummed out? What's in music? I want to. What music?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
What kind are you looking for? Hip hop? You looking for R&B? What are you looking for?
Women.
Women. Oh, okay. So what I would tell you to do is I would say Erykah Badu. I'm gonna take you back. I'm gonna go Erykah Badu. Um, any one of our albums actually. You have Jill Scott.
I was about to say Jill Scott.
Their verses?
Huh?
Their DJ battle?
Oh, the verses. Did you see that? All right. So do you have Tidal by chance?
No. So get Tidal.
If you had Tidal, they have a playlist, the verses playlist, with Erykah Badu and Jill Scott, and it's jammed all the way through.
Perfect. I'll do it.
But hey, you can sign up for free and then just listen to it. But that's right now that music. And I have Tidal. So Jay-Z also put up a what do you call it? A mix basically, and it was a mix to get us through these times right now. And it's a lot of great inspirational music on it. But definitely, I'm Erykah Badu and Jill Scott around this time with all these things going on because they're actually giving a message in their music, with the things that we're going through right now, of course. And John, who you got, John?
I'm with you on that. I was gonna say the same two people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, on that note, I'm Natalia, Nata Cornelio, running for judge, 351st District Court, way at the bottom of the judges, several pages into your ballot, but it's worth it to vote local. The election is November 3rd. There will be an early voting period of at least 2 weeks before that election, so you can vote early. I am a public defender, civil rights lawyer, and I believe in, having people on the bench who are committed to making sure that our system is fair and non-discriminatory and just better, and making any sentencing decisions or bail decisions about solutions and making sure that they're not just hurting people and punishing people without having a purpose and being thoughtful and considering the person's circumstances. So that's my platform, real simple. Have our leadership represent our people and care about them. So that's what I'm about. And I'm really honored to have been on your show. Natalia, Nata Cornelio, November 3rd. You're supposed to say your name 3 times or else people don't remember it. So Natalia, Nata Cornelio. There's no Chicanas or Latinas on the bench right now on the criminal side. We should change that in Harris County, almost 50% Latin.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to thank you for coming on again. Good luck. See you. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.